resume recording. Okay. Kyla, I throw it over to you.
All right, so we're just going to quickly go over our ground rules for our meeting today. We're going to make sure we're respectful and present during this meeting. We're going to have it so that everyone is able to participate, but no one dominating any conversations. Make sure you're being additive and not repetitive. We can aim for consensus, meaning that it's something that we can live with, we can move on from it. We're going to be open to new ideas, bring a problem. If you're going to bring a problem, also bring a solution, and make sure we're separating people from the problem. And if there is a 7-minute pause, my favorite one, we will move on. All right. But to keep our spirits light,
you mean 7 seconds,
on,
right?
Say that again?
You mean 7 seconds, right?
Oh yeah, 7 seconds. I'm so sorry. 7 minutes is way too long. Yeah. Way too long for silence. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I will have to admit that I didn't drink any coffee today, so please forgive me for any mistakes. We're gonna, keep this light and do a little icebreaker today. In this icebreaker, we're going to go into groups of 2. You'll be together for 4 minutes. And in this group, we are going to share your understanding of equity in the general sense, or you can reflect on how equity has come into your work, life, etc. And we have plenty of current events where we can pull from. So I hope you all enjoy your 4 minutes with your partner. And then I think we'll come back and then you'll have a new partner as well for an additional 4 minutes.
All right, so here are, well, actually, does anyone have anything they would like to share from their partner sharing? Anything that really stood out? You also don't have to.
One of the things that we talked about in our group, we talked about like what we do and how equity is connected to what we're involved in, but we also talked a little bit about the pandemic and how that's affected access to like opportunities and resources. And I saw, I guess on the next slide that 5 minutes is not enough time. And in both cases that we met, the person who was talking got cut off. So.
All right, first use of our 7 seconds. That was good. Yes, so one of the concerns we had that we got back, takeaways from the last meeting, was that 5 minutes is too short for a discussion of any sort. So I definitely, moving forward, originally, what I've learned is that I added an additional partner sharing, but maybe I should just make the first partner sharing a little bit longer instead of more partner sharing. So that's something I will take to the next meeting. And there was a conversation about office hours in our last meeting, and someone suggested that office hours just be 30 minutes after each meeting. And so you can just stay on the line. And so here is a poll. Let me know if that works for you, if that's, or if that's something you're just like okay with. And then I can just hang out for 30 minutes afterwards if you have any questions. And then that way you don't really have to find another time in your schedule to participate in this process. And especially if the question is short, it makes it easier for y'all. Great, I'm glad that works. So I will start that today. I'll be here for an additional 30 minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions about anything. And definitely one of the things that we've taken back into conversations for this planning process is how, when we engage, we're making sure we're not leading residents in this process, and that a lot of what we hear back are things that come from their own experiences and their own thoughts with their priorities and goals. And then we can take a lot of that and put it in the planning process and really connect it to where we are trying, or connect it to what we can do for equitable climate action and mitigation. And that when we talk about it, the easiest way for us to get relevant feedback and feedback that, or the easiest way for us to get feedback is to make sure that when we talk about RVAgreen 2050, climate action, mitigation, and resilience, that we talk about it in real terms, in terms that people would resonate with in their day-to-day experiences. And that lastly, we're working on restructuring the vision statement so that we can have improved definitions and verbiage so that when people read it, they can understand it and it makes sense to them and it resonates with them as well. All right, so quick reminder, doing an equity-centered process. So we're looking for climate action and climate resilience through equity lens and equity framework. And so that's really a really good reminder for how we will move through the rest of this process today, because we will be working on our equity tool and how we will basically go through and check off on all our action items and objectives within this process to make sure we're meeting at least one of the community priorities that were developed over the summer from conversations with community organizations and community members. Here is an overview of where we are in the process. We have just started the plan development phase. We will, as the community working group, be getting the strategies from the other working groups and really helping to refine some of the strategies that come from them and making sure that they are considering the community priorities as well as community members in the process of trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Richmond. So throwback to our vision statement, we went through a lot of the feedback from y'all and what y'all said about what our vision statement looked like, and not just the community working group, but all working groups. And it just kind of boils down to the fact that we need to simplify it, define net zero in carbon emissions, define green infrastructure, include things other than greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants that come through this, talk about and include food justice, and that currently as it stands, it's overly focused on humans, and we also need to add in consideration for animals and ecosystems within the city of Richmond. Any thoughts or questions on that part? Cool.
I have a question. Is that gonna come back to us to look at again, or you just
the draft
yeah.
or the vision statement? Yes. So we will. That's what it was the last time you all looked at it, and so we are going to go through it again in the office to really put in some of those changes that we got back to make sure that we are really taking all of that into consideration. So it'll go through the roundtable again and work its way back to the working groups.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. All right, so what is an equity tool? We're looking at ways that we can ensure that we're making decisions related to policy, planning, programming, and budgeting to advance racial equity and share prosperity within the city of Richmond. So this is what we're going to be using to really make sure that all of this equity conversation and all this equity defining and talking actually leads to something that is focused on racial equity. So we want to make sure that we have something where we can at best have a checklist to show that we are meeting the equity standards that we've set for ourselves in this process, as well as the equity standards that have been set by community conversations, the working groups, and the roundtable. So quick reminder that climate change affects some more than others, especially within the city of Richmond. We can look at what the root causes would be for why we would want to consider social factors on top of climate change factors, and why we are putting all those together to really line up who, where, and what we need to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Richmond. And looking at these maps, the great thing about maps is that it gives you a visual representation that disparities are located within the same areas of the city of Richmond. And then looking at the blue and green maps, we can also show that the disparities are in areas that have higher Black and brown populations across the city of Richmond. And any map typically most maps that show disproportionate impacts are in the same areas of the city. We tend to focus on the same city council districts. And so this is, our red map is showing the climate equity index and vulnerability score, which is accessible to everyone. And let me know if you want, we can share a link and you can click through the map yourself. But this is why in the city, especially with our outreach, we're focused on specific areas and trying to get feedback and or feedback from the 7th, 6th, 8th, and 3rd district more so than some of the other ones. And in centering equity, we are going to take this and move through procedural and distributional equity and try to work our way towards structural equity in this process. And so we really want to take this and keep this centered, for centering of equity in our process to make sure that we are constantly thinking about this while moving forward. So what is an equity tool? And so we've kind of talked about this before, but it's a product and a process. So we are going to create a physical thing that can be looked at, but then we're also going to use that physical thing to move through our process. And what does this look like? We have examples. The equity tool that we have now was created by the Roundtable, and they used examples from other cities and what they've used for their racial equity tools to help build out what they wanted to see in a racial equity tool used by the city of Richmond. So our first example is from Cleveland, and you can see how they broke down their equity tool and their top 5 question areas. So our question areas are going to be our community priorities. That were our 7 community priorities, which will come up a little bit later in this slideshow. But you can see how Cleveland has broken down their equity tool process. And then we have San Antonio, who also has done one, and they have, the way theirs is formatted is a little different, but it kind of results in the same goal. They still have the same questions, and whether or not we are impacting any of this, what the recommendations are, and how does it look when with each objective as it stands. We have Portland's, and so all of these are available on the Google slides that has been shared in the chat, and you can look through these if you really want to see how other cities have done it. But I feel like one of the easiest ways to understand what we are asking of you in this moment is to, when we get into our activity today, we will be working through how we will use our racial equity tool for objectives set through that are going to be built out for RVAgreen 2050. And we have an objective from Richmond 300 used as an example for everyone to consider in this process. So are there any questions about equity tools before we get into equity tools? And we'll do a quick partner sharing again. And so this is just going to be to share your understanding of equity as it relates to the climate and environment. So let me do breakout rooms real quick. Well, let me stop sharing and then do a breakout room. Jen, if you have a joke.
I do. Where do sheep go to get their haircut?
The Baba.
Nice. Yes. What do twins eat? Pears. Oh man.
No, Jen, you're good. You're good.
Good. Thank goodness. I'm good. Show's over.
All right. So we all have 4 minutes, and which is, I know, not enough time. Oh, I can make it. Would you prefer 6 minutes? Would that be helpful? Okay, we can do 6 minutes. All right, rooms are open. So is there anything anyone would like to share from that breakout? Anything?
I guess in my group, John and Anya pointed out that there's kind of a vicious cycle of climate and resilience sort of improvements in neighborhoods, sometimes creating gentrification, and how do we get ahead of that? Hopefully this committee can make some contribution towards that.
Definitely. I think that that's something we're really going to have to focus on in this process, because we as the community group are focused on how to bring the biggest benefit to the community with this process. Not that the other groups aren't focusing on impact to the community, but we are the second layer to check to make sure that we are not either intentionally or unintentionally negatively impacting people through this process. But also, since this is our first 2-hour meeting, we have a 5-minute break. We've never had a break before. So this is a monumental occasion, but we will be on break until 1:45. So feel free to do what you need, turn off your cameras, everything like that. And we will be ready to start our equity process when you come back.
All of them.
Bill, that one is golden.
These jokes are gonna take me out if we keep doing these every time. Okay, I love them. We gotta keep going with that though. So no one stop. If you ever have a joke, just shout it out. I love it. So what we're gonna be doing is, let me present this. Working with our screening tool that's gonna be centered around the community priorities. In the chat, I've shared with everyone the 7 community priorities that the Office of Sustainability gained from listening sessions over the last summer. And in there, you can look to see what the details on what each of the community priorities and what it means, how we got to those community priorities. But in the large scale sense, from conversations with different organizations that were identified in communities that are on the front lines of climate change in the city of Richmond, we reached out to hear what community priorities existed just as they stood, not necessarily related to climate in any way, but just what people were concerned about and what they wanted to see in their community moving forward, or things they wanted to see changed moving forward. And so we took that and really wanted to make sure that while we were creating this climate action, resilience, and mitigation process, that we were also identifying ways that we were meeting community priorities and community needs moving forward, and that we weren't just focused on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And so what we have within this equity screening tool is the breakdown, as I said before, by the different community priorities, and that comes with a list of questions and considerations to really help evaluate whether or not our climate action resilience strategies are prioritizing equity as it relates to that individual community priority. And so the goal is to also create a quick decision guide. And so we'll have the longer version as well as a very condensed version to make sure that while we move through in the planning process, people can reference that in the development of all of the strategies with it moving forward throughout this planning period. And so, yeah. These are an overview, very quick overview of what the 7 community priorities are. We have racial equity and environmental justice, engagement and communication, government accountability, community wealth, housing and buildings, neighborhoods, health and well-being. I will say for housing and buildings, the main, if not only, community priority that we heard around that was just affordable housing. And I think that the reason I pull that out is because since it was the only one listed within that area, that's clearly a major concern for residents within the city of Richmond. It's been shown by a variety of things that that's very much a concern for people in the city of Richmond. And so I really wanted to bring that also to the forefront of this conversation, that we're really focusing and identifying a way that or a very clear priority that has been set, which is affordable housing. People are looking for affordable housing, and that we can use that moving forward when we think about certain things. And so kind of looking where does that get us in this process? So does a proposed action promote racial equity and environmental justice, reflect equitable engagement and communication, demonstrate and promote government accountability, promote community wealth, expand affordable housing, support safe and beautiful neighborhoods, and promote health and well-being? And so we use that in an example for our strategy from Richmond 300, continue funding programs to plant trees and educate public on the importance of trees. And so with that, we're going to do a group activity where we'll all work through this process together, and then everyone will be broken out into a room that has two different options, and we're going to have 15 minutes each on the different screening tools to really assess whether or not this is something that works, something you want to get rid of, or if something that doesn't make sense. And you have the option to move the stars, question marks, and X's around on some of these. And so right now, what we will focus on is does this strategy work within racial equity and environmental justice? And what are things that we should consider with that strategy moving forward? In the slideshow, everyone should have a link to, there should be another link within the slideshow to open up a different slide that will give you access to the racial equity and environmental justice screening tool. I don't know if everyone has access, but let me share it in the chat as well. There you go. And so we'll take the next 5 minutes and you guys can read through and move things around. And if you have any questions, just shout them out. All right, it looks like things are slowing down a bit. So I will say anyone who placed a question mark, if you could add why the question mark is in the feedback here in the notes at the bottom down here, or feel free to verbally share with us as well.
I put a question mark beside the one is like second from the bottom about identified geography. Business prioritize an identified geography vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. I don't know. I just wondered if that. I mean, is that a way to include our efforts to include kind of more ecological, like not only just humans but kind of animal populations to that, or?
Yeah, Richard, I think that one to me also says that, you know, are we building this near a area that floods frequently, or, you know, is this an area that is typically impacted more during a hurricane or a snowstorm?
Yeah, okay. I guess I'm sorry. I guess my issue is if that could be abused in somehow. Like if you think about building on oceanfront property, you know, expensive or places like that, that we might not necessarily want to include as, it could be vulnerable, yeah, but do we want to include that as a target, equity target? But perhaps I'm misconstruing it.
I think maybe I missed, like, to do this right, I was thinking about the Richmond 300 policy proposal about the trees, and I was like trying to use that tool. Are we grading the tool itself? Are we trying to grade that policy proposal of funding tree planting projects?
Ah, so this was supposed to be used with that example to grade the tool itself. And so did it work? I guess in the process of thinking through this, did that tool work for helping to grade that policy that came from Richmond 300? So a combination of both of those things is kind of really what we want to get out of this.
Okay, well, and so keeping that question in mind and trying to like apply this tool to the question, I think I came up with a lot of question marks because it's kind of a vague policy proposal. Like we don't know if that policy proposal like includes any community engagement. So we don't know how the impacted communities might feel, or if it's acknowledging and respecting the history of that area, because like a vague policy, yeah, it wasn't detailed enough. But I think so the tool then works for us to like evaluate the policy. You know, does it have enough meat to it to address what's in the tool?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that that's also a go use of the tool to see if the way the policy is right now leads to vagueness or it can be misconstrued in some other way based off lack of clarity in the policy itself.
So I thought I was clear on the assignment, and then I think I just got a little bit confused. So I'm gonna put it in my words, and you can let me know if I did it correctly. So basically, these questions, we are saying whether we want to use these, like the ones that I guess get the most support. We want to use these questions to say, so that when we have certain things proposed to this community working group from the other working groups, that it'll kind of go through this filter of questions before it's then suggested to the community to be implemented?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And specifically at this particular phase, we will be using this tool to filter all policies through before community feedback is gathered on them. So there's still another phase of community engagement and feedback in this process. And we want to make sure that before we put it out for community engagement, that we are considering all of these things beforehand as well.
Okay, and you just wanted us to work on the first one, correct?
Yes, yeah, just the first one right now, because we're going to break out into groups where you'll work on the other ones as well.
Okay.
So are there any other questions or concerns before we do that? Great. All right. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope that process went well. I guess just a quick pulse, do we feel like 15 minutes was too short or too long for this process? And if it was fine, you don't have to say anything.
We didn't understand the instructions. Was it 15? It was 15 minutes for each two things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and okay,
So for my group, the first one we got through the entire thing, but the second question, it would have been nice to have a tad bit more time for discussion.
Okay. So I did work the presentation around a little bit so that we'll have 8 minutes in breakout rooms for everyone to discuss what happened. And so it'll be a different group of people, it'll be a smaller group of people, but you can record your thought process and discussion topics that you would have had from this in the next partner sharing that we're going to do. So I don't know if that, Kylie, do you feel like that would help some of what happened in your group or?
Potentially.
All right. So let me share my screen real quick. Share. Okay. So we're going to move into our last partner sharing of the day, where there's also the wrap-up document that we used last time. And so I have another one for today where you can put your takeaways and questions from this process while you're discussing what what you shared in the equity screening tool and how that might impact the work group topics, your work, this work, and the topics within the working group. Any questions before I start clicking buttons again to do that?
Kendra, are we, how are you assigning the pages?
Well, I guess that's a good question. When you get put in a breakout room, does it say group breakout room 1 or 2 when you do that?
yes.
Okay, so go to the slide with your number on it. So there should be 1, 2, 3, like group 1, group 2, group 3 within the slide. Any other questions? Oh, wait, no, let me. Okay, all right. All right. Anything anyone is dying to share with the group? You don't have to be dying to share with the group. You could just want to share with the group as well. And if not, oops.
Actually, Kendra, it seems like there, I heard some of this in the small group that I led, and then it was reiterated in the smaller group that I was just in. A lot of confusion about what today's purpose was. So a lot of people thought that we were already evaluating something, as opposed to developing a tool by which we will in the future evaluate things. And I'm stating that because that's my understanding of what we were doing, the latter I described, but if you can confirm that, I think for the larger group that might be helpful.
Yes, so we were evaluating the tool that we will be using to evaluate the strategies that are coming up. And I think that this slide that I'll share now might help give a better timeline of what's happening. And so we were here today to refine the equity tool. And so what we did is going to go back to the roundtable, and then in our next meeting, we will have a climate vulnerability and risk assessment. And during that time, between now and our first meeting in February, we will have a completed equity tool that we will use for drafting strategies. So in our first February meeting, we will receive strategies from the Buildings and Energy, Environment, Transportation, and Waste working groups, and we will use that equity tool to evaluate what is coming from those groups in the first meeting of February. But until then, our next meeting is going to be a meeting about climate vulnerability and risk assessment and our business as usual case scenarios and policy recommendations for this process in the city of Richmond. Does that help with understanding of where we are and how this is going?
Kendra, would it be possible to maybe at some point explain what exactly the technical expert working groups do? Because I know we're supposed to be like the last people who see what it is they're coming up with, so that we can make sure they're not missing this community piece.
Yeah.
But I'm not completely sure what it is that they are, what their processes are and what they're doing and what they're supposed to be coming up with. So I don't necessarily understand completely what we will be looking at in the future.
Yeah, so they will be coming up with what the strategies used to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And so they're going to be doing that based off of the technical working groups that they're on. So if, for example, for Buildings and Energy, it's going to focus specifically on how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions caused by buildings in the city of Richmond. And so they will be drafting strategies very specific to their working groups and very specific to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then we will get those greenhouse gas emission strategies and use them and evaluate them on how they're approaching community priorities as well.
So, so there are 2 meetings on drafting strategies and 1 on revising. Is it 2 just because of just time that it will take, or is it a cyclical process where in between those 2 we give them feedback and it comes back to us? And
yeah, it's cyclical. So we will get feedback from the first strategies, or we will give feedback and it will go back to the other working groups, and then they will send something back to us. And then we will send it to the roundtable. And then it will come back to us and the working groups, the other working groups.
Yeah, I assume you'll have something to us if it's available before 2/12 meeting, right?
Yeah, I will try to get that out to you guys as fast as possible. Great. I'm also going to, I have to plug in my computer before. Okay, so, and then just to wrap up, we're gonna do, this is just a quick overview of what we're doing again. So throw back to our Smarty strategies and making sure that in this process that we not only have SMART goals, but they're also inclusive and equitable, which is why we have the equity tool that we just evaluated. Here you go here. So this is where the equity screening tool comes in here at the bottom. And then our next So if you have not watched the Equity Foundation's video that was sent out, it will be open until January 15th, and our next meeting is going to be on January 22nd. I hope that everyone has the calendar invite. And if you have things that you think you want to add to the equity screening tool, that I can send out that in a follow-up email, the link to that, so that you can continue to have access to it and add your updates as you please throughout this process, or well, until roughly the end of next week. And then if you have any feedback you want to give from this meeting, the feedback survey is open and the link is accessible within the PowerPoint as well. So if there are no questions or comments, that is the end of the meeting. And as a reminder, I will hang out for roughly 30 minutes if you want to talk about anything or have any questions about anything. But thank you for showing up. I can't wait to read through everything that you guys have put on for the equity tool and everything. And that is the end. Happy first week of 2021.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you.